Hi, everyone. This is Anne Marie, the anti-HR lady, and welcome to another Conversations with Black Women Who Coach. This is a series where I like to talk about the coaching profession as well as practice with Black women who are coaches, because I highly recommend that if you're going to work with a coach, that you hire a Black woman. As most of you who know me know, a Black woman, I credit a Black woman coach with changing the whole trajectory of my life in a positive way. And so I really want more of us to have the opportunity to connect with coaches, first of all, and specifically with Black women coaches, so that you can use it to improve your life, whether it's personal, professional, or both. So today, one other thing, I created the Black Women Coach Directory. I always, got to remember to say that. And Janice is a member. Our coach today is a member of that directory. You can find it at blackwomencoach.com. If you find this content helpful, please like, comment, and subscribe. And you will be able to find additional information about all of the coaches that I talk to in these conversations in the description of the video, so that if you want to reach out to them, you can do so. Today, we are talking to Janice Sutherland, who is a career strategy coach. Thank you for being here, Janice. Tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do.
Right. Well, as you can probably tell a little bit, I'm English born, but I have lived in the Caribbean for over 12 years. So I live in a little island, twin-island state of Antigua and Barbuda. In a past life, many past lives, I was a senior exec. I was the CEO, first female CEO for the telecoms industry out here. But realized that wasn't really what I wanted to do, because I didn't come out to the Caribbean to continue doing the senior exec, but
to be working that hard. I know what that
even harder than I did in the UK. So I decided to take my own. I'd pivoted a few times in my career myself, and decide to pivot. Once I got over my own concerns, fears, and whatnot, decide to pivot into a coach. Started out as a leadership because that's what I was in. I was a CEO. I'm used to senior leadership, but actually found what was the clients that I was attracting were women over 40, nearer 50 plus, who were looking for that next stage of their career. Because like it or not, we're living longer, which the retirement ages are changing, which means we have to work longer. Mm-hmm. So this is really the time now. If you're in your 40s, 50s, as I am, late 50s, you really need to start considering if this is the career you want to be doing for the next 10 to 15 years.
And I would also throw out as a woman who's also in her 50s. Yes, I know people always question when I say that, but I am. That you also start thinking a lot about whether you like what you're doing.
Exactly.
When you get to be in your post, yes. I just think it starts in your middle 40s.
Yes.
But like, if I got to work longer,
yep.
Do I want to be doing this? And a lot of times the answer is no. And then you feel stuck because you don't know how to go about changing, which is why a career strategy coach is what you need.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So what inspired you to do this kind of coaching?
Well, as I said, it wasn't so much inspired. I think it presented itself to me because I kept ignoring the signs. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And when I looked at the clients I was attracting, they were Black women over 40 going into their 50s. There were women just like me, just like you, who were, okay, we're very successful in our own careers, but we're thinking, what next? Is this what I want to be doing for the next 10 to 15 years? Right. And what I found, when you've been very successful at that, when you've been get to that stage of your career, and you've been very successful, sometimes it can be very difficult to divorce yourself from what that level of success brings. Be it the reputation, be it the title, be it the money. So the fear is even more heightened when you get to that level. And if it's a case of the fact that you want to stay in that career, which is fine, which is still fine, how do you get the most out of it? How do you make it palatable so that you can stay the next 10 to 15 years? So it was working with those women that really, I suppose, it lent itself to me. I naturally attracted them and naturally had empathy with that category of women, that niche of women.
I think that makes a lot of sense, because I think everything you're saying really resonates with me, because that was my experience. I live in Mexico. I would say probably I travel a lot, so it's always hard to say where I actually live. But I would say probably 70 at this point, about 70% of the time I live in Mexico. And it definitely is something when you get to be that age where you said, well, you're good at what you do,
Yes.
you know how to do it really well, but that might not necessarily be what you want to be doing. Like, even though I was really good at a particular thing, I really had to face the reality that I didn't really like it that much, even though, and how did I use the skills that I had that made me so good at it to do something that would make me happier?
Yeah.
And I'm still like thinking in terms of that. So, you know, even in terms of what I do now, primarily just HR consulting and travel advising, is like, which one of those things do I want to be doing in another 10 years? And I think I've decided, even though I'm not going to share that yet with my audience, but I think I've decided what that is, because I think your happiness becomes more important.
Absolutely.
It becomes more important to us as we get older, because we understand, you know, you get into your 40s and 50s, people important start dying, your parents, sometimes siblings, friends. And it makes you think more about the importance of time and how you spend your time in a way that you don't think about it when you're in your 20s and 30s. It's like you get the degree that everybody told you you're supposed to get, and you try to make as much money as possible. And your happiness is kind of like secondary to that. And then you get older and you start thinking, but I don't really like any of this. And I really want to be happy about what I do for a living, because, you know, this is what you spend the majority of your time doing.
Yes.
Like, I need to be happy doing it. So it doesn't surprise me to hear that the women you ended up talking to were women in our age group, because that's when you start thinking about that stuff, right?
Yeah.
You know, is when you get into this part of your life and you begin to really grapple with the reality of time, and that it is in fact finite, even though it's finite when you're in your 20s, people. I just want to say, you know, and the sooner you come to grips with how you spend your time, the better. But we tend to think more about it when we get older. And then we realize that we don't want to do what we're doing. And then the question becomes, well, then what do you do? Because as you said, you get used to certain things that come with
all the trappings.
And you don't necessarily want to give all of those things up, especially the money part. And so you've got to figure out, like, how do I have a lifestyle that I'm comfortable having, but still find a way to do things that I actually enjoy doing. And I think it's really hard. For me, it was definitely working with a coach that got me to where I am. And a Black woman particularly, I don't think I would have gotten to where I got as fast as I did if I hadn't worked with her. So I really like working with someone who is a career, like has experience in that particular area and can ask you some hard questions, as well as give you some advice. So why would you say that this particular type of coaching that you do is so important? And what's the value add of you being a Black woman doing it?
Wow, well, you said so much. So let me try and pull it all together. Let me pull it together. I think the importance of the fact is that we as Black women, no matter where we come from, the UK, Caribbean, I'm Caribbean descent, you know, we were told this is the path you follow. Quite often the career we followed wasn't our career. It was what made our parents proud, so they could have bragging rights. And so at this stage, it's, as you said, our values change. We can accept that our values change. And I think the important thing for us is to understand that we are allowed to make that change. Being of the age we are, we have also, we've fought the slings and arrows that, you know, from a microaggressions through navigating a racist workplace that didn't want us, where we were the only person in the room that looked like us. I know for me, when I was working, it was literally, we had a thing called Spot the Black Man. We'd look to see somebody else.
Oh my God, I hope you all are listening to what Janice is saying, you know, because I talk a lot about these things. She sounds much nicer when she's saying it, but she's saying the same things that I always say about these workplaces, and it kind of speeds up when you get into your 40s and 50s, like, do I want to keep dealing with this?
Yeah, do I have to keep fighting?
Something that I don't even really like doing, but it's paying me well. But now I have to deal, but you've got, like you said, you're dealing with the slings and arrows for so long. By the time you get to be in your 40s and 50s, you are tired, first of all. And you're doing things, as you said, that you're not necessarily thrilled being. You know, in my family, I'm the lawyer. And, you know, everybody was really proud of that. And I'm proud of it too. I worked really hard for it. but it wasn't necessarily the thing that
Yes.
I wanted to be doing, even when I graduated from law school.
Yeah.
Right. And so you're really right that a lot of us end up doing the things that somebody else really
Makes our parents look
wanted us to do. And I kind of picked the career niche that I picked because I was a single mother.
Yeah.
And the money was good, and I had a child to take care of, and I had to make some decisions, and I made them, and I'm not sorry that I made them, but it was really that kind of decision that I could go off and do this thing, and it would pay off eventually, but in between that time and that time, it was going to be very difficult, and I didn't want, I had a child that I had to take care of. So there are also choices that you make, and then you're stuck with those choices for a while because you have responsibilities, and then you get to be in your 40s and 50s. And I said, people start to die, but also your children become adults.
Yes.
And that also allows you to have the freedom to make some different kinds of choices, even though you still have to, as you said, give yourself the permission, which is something I always say to people, is giving yourself permission to live the life that you want, and not waiting for somebody else to give you permission to do it. But I think sometimes without help, it takes you a long time, end up being in your 60s before you get to it.
Absolutely.
And I was lucky enough to work with a coach who was like, when I said to her, I really don't like what I'm doing. I hate the work environment was extremely toxic, and racist. And I was like, in a perfect world, I would really like to live outside of the United States. I would like to move abroad. And she was like, well, why can't you do that?
Exactly.
And I was like, well, what do you mean? Of course I can't just up and do that. You know what I mean? Because I traveled for work, and I found that I really enjoy traveling, and I really enjoyed the time that I was outside of the country. And what really made the workplace become completely impossible for me was when COVID happened and I couldn't travel anymore. Right. And that's when I was like, I cannot stay here with these people.
Yes.
Right. Even remotely, virtually, I can't do it. Right. And that's when I was like, in a perfect world, if I could figure out a way to do the things that I like, but live somewhere else and be able to travel. And she was like, well, why can't you do that? Why do you believe? Like, what are the things that are making you think?
Exactly.
And let's talk about what you would need to do.
Yes.
In order to make that happen. And that's where career strategist, this person was an executive coach, but also a career strategy person that I didn't even know I needed at the time, right? That was able to help me come to what I needed to get to. Because the first part, as you said, is the permission part and the actual, I could actually do something and be happy, right? And a lot of us, it's really hard for us to do that without help because we're so used to doing everything for everybody else and not making choices that are really driven by our happiness. So as a Black woman coach, why would you say that particularly with the work that you're doing, it's so important that you're doing it from the lens of being a Black woman?
The one thing that really sticks to me, I remember when working with a client, is the fact that she says, you get it. Because quite often it's not just the career, it's not just the career choice, it's also, can I say, the career trauma. Because one of the things when you start coaching yourself, it's not the surface level, not wanting the job. There's a reason why. Quite often that there's a reason what you don't want to be in that career, and it's not necessarily you don't like the career. It could be how you've been treated during that career. And there's a lot of trauma, for want of a better word, career trauma, that has made you fearful from taking that next step, from making that move, from having that all-important conversation you need to have, be with your boss, be with your partner, whoever has a vested interest in your career. So having someone that looks like you, who has maybe walked a little bit in your shoes, and can say, look, not just say that I've done it, you can do it too, but just to show it's possible. Which is why I have my own podcast, This Woman Can, and I like to share the experiences of Black women's careers. So even everybody just says, oh, that rings a bell for me, that resonates for me. Just that one little piece of advice means, well, if somebody else has done it, I can do it too. It's possible. Yeah, it's possible, because too often we're caught in our me, myself, and I mentality. Nobody knows what I'm going through. Nobody understands. Nobody could possibly share that journey. And so we get caught in this me, myself, and I bubble. that we think nobody else can understand. But if you tap the woman on the shoulder next to you, invariably say, well, yeah, I've had that experience. And this is what I did. You know,
yeah,
so
it's a certain confirmation that you get as
yeah.
a Black woman when you're talking about these things with other Black women, because we know, and you don't even have to explain. And what I found with other coaches was there was a tendency to question what I was saying, what's happening in the workplace. That never happened with me when I worked with this person. She understood because she had experienced it herself, and she actually told me about things that also had happened to her to confirm that I wasn't crazy, that I wasn't taking things too personally, which is something we get accused of a lot as Black women when we raise these issues. And I think what you just said about seeing the possibility is very, very important. Like being able to see that someone that looks like you actually did. I mean, that's why representation is so important in all aspects of life, right? Because you get to see that there are actually people, Black people, living it outside of, the Western, system, and they're happy and they're thriving, which makes it possible to realize that you could figure out a way to build something for yourself as well as take your career in a different direction than what you might have actually thought that you could, that you don't necessarily have to have whatever the traditional job is that people think. Because what you said is very true about, you might find out that the reason you don't like the job is not because of the job itself, because that's what I found. It wasn't because it was all the things that came with it. Exactly what you said, doing that job as me became too hard because of all the things that I had to deal with in order to do it well, even though people would hire me because I had this particular expertise, but then wouldn't let me do my job because they didn't want a Black woman telling them what to do, right? Even though they had hired the Black woman to tell them what to do, right? So what qualities would you say individuals should look for in their ideal career strategy coach? If they're looking for someone like you, what should they be looking for?
Well, we touched on a little bit. One of the things I think for me is, and it sounds a bit woo-woo, but do you gel? Can you connect? Or is that person approachable? Do you feel that you can share, especially we've just talked about some of the challenges that around why you're still in that career, why you don't like your career. Do you feel comfortable to share those greatest fears? Those concerns with that person. Are they non-judgmental? So that's the other thing, as you said, a Caucasian white coach will, that really, we kind of accept that's a possibility. We'll explore it further, but we're not going to dismiss you. And have they had experience in the field of coaching that they're going into? I am a multiple pivoter. I'm like you, change countries. I've been a single parent. I've moved countries. I've left jobs because they didn't suit me. I have the courage of my convictions, so have they walked a little bit in your shoes? So those are the few things I think I would really look for. But do you gel? Do you connect? Do you feel comfortable sharing maybe your deepest, darkest secrets with that individual?
Because it does become very personal if you're doing this kind of work with someone, because I remember at one point saying to her, I feel like you're shrinking me. You're not my shrink. And I feel like, and she wasn't, but in order to get to like certain things, you have to actually share personal things with your coach. And then you're like, I can't believe that I told you that. I don't normally tell people this story, right? So it is very important. I think what you've said about the qualities that people have to understand and look for is very important, because you have to feel really comfortable with the person in order for the work to be succceccessful. Otherwise, you're not going to want to share things that you actually need to share. So my counterpoint question to what I just asked is, what are you looking for in a client? When people are coming to you, we can't take everyone.
No, right? We don't.
And as someone who has the luxury of being able to say who I am and am not going to work with, which is one of the nice things of working for yourself, which you can't do when you work for other people. How do you decide who's an ideal client for you?
I mean, likewise what I talked about, whether they're approachable, whether the coach's approachable, I need to look at whether they're coachable. Are they going to be receptive to some of the hard questions I'm going to ask? Are they going to be open to accepting that they may have to make some very difficult decisions that make them very uncomfortable?
Yeah.
And are they willing to accept that the issue actually may be you sometimes in that situation? So for me, it's about coachability. It's about someone who's being flexible, who, I'm not saying you can't get sensitive about it, because some of the stuff can really, you have to think, it makes you it does make you feel, is she
I
right?
actually think if your coach doesn't make you feel uncomfortable, I don't know if they're doing a good job. I mean, with this kind, with life coaching and career coaching, I don't know how you can be comfortable.
Very true.
You should be comfortable with them.
Yes.
But the subject, there are going to be things that you are going to talk about, and they might have to confront you with.
Yes.
Like you said, about whether the common denominator in the situation is you sometimes, and often it is us. And whether or not you can hear that stuff, whether you're able to hear that kind of stuff is really important, in terms of being successful. And then, you're not willing to do that. And then you say the coach didn't do a good job. And it's like, no, you didn't listen to the coach, or you didn't want to hear what the coach was saying, and it's not on the coach. And then, it's that kind of thing. So I think that's very important that you said, in terms of people needing to be receptive to the process in order for it to work. So can you tell us a little bit about what people need to do if they want to work with you, and whether there are any programs or classes or things that you're offering that you would like my viewers to know about?
Yeah, I mean, well, people can connect with me, JaniceSutherland.com, or just follow me on my socials. I am Janice Sutherland. It's interesting, you said at the top of our conversation about realizing people are aging or passing, and I just I made a decision to take 4 months out of my career to care for my terminally ill mother, and I had that, and I suppose I had my career choices allowed me to take that time to be able to do that without feeling guilty with my career, because I knew the job I had before, I could never have done that. So I took the decision to step back a bit from my coaching practice, but I am coming back. So they can contact me. I'm currently working. I just finished a survey really assessing the impact of career trauma on Black women in their careers past 50, because these are things we've harbored that we don't talk about, that have an impact on the decisions we make going forward, that we don't always admit to. So I'll be launching a program around that, about overcoming that career. I don't want to say overcoming career trauma, but it's about taking that next step and acknowledging that it did have an impact on me, and it has affected my way of thinking when I've made career choices going down the line. So that will be coming up. But if people head over to my website, JaniceSutherland.com, register for my weekly newsletter, they'll be the first to know once I launch the program.
That's great. I'm very sorry to hear about your mother. I know what that is like. My mother passed away in 2020, and that was one of the pivotal things that caused me to reassess my entire life, right? So it was a hard thing, and it still is a hard thing, but it was also something that really helped me make good choices for myself that I probably would not have made had that not happened. And it's really great that you have the opportunity to spend time with her, because that's time that's going to be very important to you later. And I'm really glad that, my sisters and I were able to do that with my mother as well, because it's extremely important to you later when you don't have her there anymore. What is one of the most important things you would say that you've learned about yourself through coaching other people in this particular area?
As I think about that, first that comes to my head is that actually I can allow myself to be vulnerable. And it's not just sometimes about the coaching, the coachee experience. As a coach, I think sometimes you have to share some of your experiences that may have been traumatic for you too, and also being able to take your own experiences to support you in coaching others. Knowing the process I've just been through with my own mother, that has really opened my eyes to looking at executive women who are juggling that, because it's not spoken about. It's definitely not spoken about. So how can I support women going through that process? Because we're still successful, But on the
outside, it's something that all of us are going to have to experience. Yes. If we live long enough, and it's usually in that 40 to 50 range. If you're lucky, then you get to have your parents that long. Yes. And then once you get into your 50s, it's rare to have, this into your 60s. Some people are lucky enough for that. But usually between 40 and 55 is when you have to grapple with these things, and you're working, and workplaces are not always as sympathetic as they should be, because you're dealing a lot of times with millennials, and they can't even fathom that this is coming for them eventually too. So they don't understand it. Because I remember when I was younger and I was supervising someone who was significantly older than me, and she was dealing with taking care of an elderly mother. And to me, one of the greatest failures to me as a manager at that time was that I was not sympathetic enough to her. And I realized that after, right? Because at that time, when you're 30, you don't think that you can relate to people needing more support with children, that they just had a baby. Yes. But you don't realize that what it takes out of somebody to have to be taking care of an elderly parent, right? And so it's one of those things that I think more of us need to realize. It's coming, even when you're 30. It's coming. It's coming, but you don't think about it in that term, because at that time you don't think, that could never really happen, right? Yeah. But then you get into your 40s and 50s, and it's a thing that you have to deal with.
And I think as the person and as the coachee in that position, we are so used to being strong and shouldering everything and doing everything, we don't need support. Admitting that you do need that support sometimes can be very, very tough. And, and having and also a vulnerability, but having the courage sometimes to say, look, I need this help. I need support. Just someone to talk to say, look, this person got my last ever nerve, or this is the bottleneck I'm at. And just to have that outlet to say, well, you can do this, or try this angle, and have this conversation, because we don't know how to put into words. And let's not talk about when we get to menopause. To add that on top.
Oh Lord, let's not. That will require a whole other conversation, Janice.
So it's all those things. We could go on forever. Anne-Marie.
And all of these things have an impact on your career, whether you recognize that they're going to or not. And I think that we need to talk more about them in the context of workplace.
Yes.
Because we don't. Especially women. I mean, women would rather, jump off a building than admit that they're having hot flashes and they can't go to another meeting and be up in there sweating like a horse. It's like you just suck it up, and half the women in the room might be experiencing it.
Exactly.
Right? But no one is talking about it, that this is a real thing that people have to deal with. And how do you figure out how to accommodate some of those things in the workplace for other people who may not be able, maybe dealing with that, right? As well as the elderly parents. No one really makes room for that stuff. Everybody talks about a lot of other things, but I think, it's back to the narrative of, as we get older, and as women, as Black women especially, it's almost like you disappear, and all of the concerns that you have become unimportant concerns, because we are in a society that values and worships youth so much that everybody thinks they're going to be young forever, and they don't realize these are things you should care about, because someday you're going to need somebody to care about it for you, right? This has been a really great conversation. Thank you so much for being here. As I said before, if you would like to reach out to Janice, her information will be linked to the description of this video. So if you would like to reach out to her and talk to her or keep in touch with her, you will be able to do so by just checking the description and the link. I have really enjoyed having this conversation with you, Janice. Thank you so much for being here. You can find wonderful Black women coaches just like Janice in the Black Women Coach directory by going to blackwomencoach.com. And I appreciate all of you watching, and I hope that you will stay tuned for another conversation with Conversations with Black Women Who Coach. Thanks for being here. See you guys in the next video. Bye. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.